Grab your popcorn, grab your lightsaber, and grab your goat. Tonight is our special all Star Wars edition of the Witches Movie Coven. We're going to be talking about all of the original films, most specifically the films and not the TV shows, all of the good films and even the bad ones that Courtney likes. But before we get started talking about Star Wars, let's introduce ourselves, starting with my favorite movie synopsis person, Richard-Lael.
That would be Richard-Lael is me. I am Richard-Lael. It's one name like Jean-Luc. I am the gentleman psychic, and I am so excited about today's show. You have no idea how excited I am to be here.
Courtney Buckley.
That's me, Courtney Buckley, also known as Jason's worst nightmare, after tonight at least. I'm Ghostbait on Scared and Alone. I am pumped. I am ready. I am a huge Star Wars nerd, but I'll fight. So let's go.
All right, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Greene. I'm an author. I'm an editor at Llewellyn Worldwide. I'm also a journalist, and I wrote, which I don't have right now because I'm surrounded by Star Wars toys, Lights, Camera, Witchcraft, a definitive guide to witches and witchcraft in American television and cinema. So I don't think anyone's nightmare, but I am also a big Star Wars fan, so I'm really excited to be here and talking about these movies tonight.
And our special guest, Beckie-Ann Galentine.
Hi, I'm Beckie-Ann. I am a paranormal investigator, mostly a little bit of a witch, and I like Star Wars, but it sounds like I'm going to be underqualified for the Star Wars fans tonight.
Well, at least you won't lose any friends. Like Courtney and I's relationship will be lost tonight. And I'm Jason Mankey. I've written lots of books. One of my first book for Llewellyn was The Witches Athame, which mentions lightsabers as, witches, athames for wizards or whatever. All right. So we're going to be talking about 47 years worth of movies. But before we get to that, it's time for our unbiased movie synopsis with Richard-Lael. I am curious how many of these you watched.
I saw exactly one, but only because I was dragged to the theater years ago and I forgot about it until just recently. I went, oh yeah, there's this one about this love triangle and an android that looks like a soccer ball, and that's all I remember because I was bored to tears, and I'm not going to tell you about that, but I will tell you a synopsis of 47 years worth of cinematic whatever. Anyway, a long time ago, I can still remember the way the music used to make me smile, and I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance, that maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me shiver. With every paper I deliver bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. Michael Rennie was there the day the earth stood still, but he told us where to stand. And Flash Gordon was there in silver underwear. Claude Rains was the invisible man. Then something went wrong for Fay Ray and King Kong. They got caught in a celluloid jam. And at a deadly pace, it came from outer space. And this is how the message ran. The stars on 45 keep on turning in your mind, like we can work it out. Remember, twist and shout. You still don't tell me why, and no reply. Bicycle, bicycle, bicycle. I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride my bike. I want to ride my bicycle. I want to ride it where I like. You say black, I say white. You say bark, I say bite. You say shark, I say, hey man, Jaws was never my scene, and I don't like Star Wars. Live long and prosper.
That's all you need to know, apparently, about the Star Wars movies. Heather, would you like to put these movies in context for us?
Sure. So I was trying to come up with a way, and stressfully so, to encapsulate and give you 5 really important things to know about all these movies and everything that Star Wars is, and that's nearly impossible. The one thing I will mention, which Jason already did, there was, we are not going to be talking about the TV shows. We're going to be talking about the 9 main movies that really started it all and kept it going all these years. And that means we won't be talking about the witches that are on planet Dathomir that appear in more recent stuff, Ahsoka 2023, TV shows and other places. So we'll save that for another show. This one, we're going to give you that basis. So what are the top 5 things? I'm going to list them and then I'll just lay them out a little bit more. I picked a few based on the entire fandom, the entire scope and weight, because this is a cultural product that has its own gravitational pull. There's no way to deny that. And it only is outdone by Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Harry Potter in some cases. Some other lists say Hello Kitty and the Pooh and Mickey Mouse outdo Star Wars from the media perspective. But either way, it has its own gravitational pull. So the number one is Star Wars is more like Lord of the Rings than it is like Star Trek. And I'll fight anybody on that one. 2, it's one of the few, if only, fandoms that actually launched its own religious movement. Number 3, Star Wars also launched, when it first opened, a renewed interest in sci-fi films and sword and sorcery films. Number 4, there is a secret Darth Vader that appears on the National Cathedral, showing us how much of a gravitational pull this product has. Number 5, the last 3 movies are successful because they capture an idea of nostalgia. And so I'm going to lay those out a little bit more. But the last thing I wanted to throw out there for those non-Star Wars people is one of my favorite little tidbits is that the only 2 characters to appear in all 9 movies are C-3PO and R2-D2. They actually also appear in Rogue One as well. So those are some things. Now, number 1, Star Trek. Number 1, Star Wars is more like Lord of the Rings than Star Trek. Why is that the case? Star Trek is mostly episodic. It has lots of good information in it. It does have its own lore, does have its own story, but it doesn't have the Joseph Campbell hero story, the hero's tale. That is what Star Wars is based on. It is as much a sword and sorcery epic fantasy as it is a sci-fi film. It actually is more of the Lord of the Rings hero fantasy, hero story, baked in or sprinkled with sci-fi dust. Okay, so that's what this is. And so that's why it's more like Lord of the Rings than it is like Star Trek. And there's so much, you could write a dissertation on that. Number 2, the fandom. So does everyone know that there is Jediism is actually a fandom? It has almost 500,000 people worldwide. Most of them are in Australia and New Zealand for some reason. But there's a lot of stats. I don't know what the latest stat is. There actually is a temple with a 501c3 that was started, I think, back in maybe 2009, I think. I can't remember. I actually did an extended chapter in a book, an essay, a long essay, 10 pages or so, on Jediism and the fandom and its relationships. So I did have a lot of stats, but they're a little bit outdated. So those, in fact, and one person said the reason why it has this is because it deals with things like God and the cosmos and redemption. So these things that pull us in, and it created, of course, this Jediism. Number 3, after Star Wars released, sci-fi films and sword and sorcery films were not popular. Remember, this was the 80s. What was popular? Witchcraft films. That's the 70s. And lots of other genres. When Star Wars launched, we had a string of sci-fi films. I'm sure everybody remembers Buck Rogers and the Black Hole. two of the more popular ones, not really. But
I remember the Black Hole.
There you go.
Yes, Disney's Black Hole. I love that movie.
Disney's Black Hole, Alien, Blade Runner, Close Encounters. There's a number of them were launched into the late 70s, into the 80s, and then you also had a lot of sword and sorcery films that came alongside it. So Star Wars had a lot of impact. Its success in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s when it first came out. And number 4, National Cathedral. The National Cathedral in Washington has an actual gargoyle shaped like Darth Vader. This happened when the National Cathedral had a contest for children to create a gargoyle for the National Cathedral, and Darth Vader won. And Darth Vader, they've had complaints about an evil character being a gargoyle. How is it an evil character keeping evil out? The church says, well, it's a story about redemption. And so he's a perfect character to be there. So he is on the National Cathedral if you go to Washington. He is hard to see, though. So I had trouble seeing him when I was there, so bring binoculars. So that was 4. And number 5, nostalgia. Okay, so and I wrote an article on the first movie when it came out, and the first of the last three. I'm sorry, so that was 4, 5, 6, 7. So when 7 came out, I wrote an article about it and how it really plays on nostalgia. This is something Disney does very, very well. It knows this concept. If you watch Disney films, it is always a spoonful of nostalgia. They always are using that to earn more money, to make more profits, as well as to pull at our heartstrings. The first movie of that last set is a remake almost of the first 3 movies, and it continues through number 2 and 3. You constantly hear repeats of lines, nods to the old movies. Disney knows how to appeal to its new fan base and also bring in the old fan base. And so those last 3 movies are almost a regurgitation of the first 3 in a modern way, in so many ways, narratively, thematically, just practically, plot-wise, everything. You can see whole scenes repeated even. So that's that. And so, and the last thing I noted again, C-3PO and R2-D2 3 were actually repeated in all of the 9 movies, and that was originally intended, and they still remain that so, and they're iconic in that way. But that's it. That's all. There's so much to say. We can talk about potatoes as asteroids. We can talk about, so there's so much lore out there. I'm going to stop because we could go on forever.
When you talk about Jediism being a religion, here's the thing that most people don't know. So in 1971, this witch named Lady Sheba publishes a Book of Shadows. It's the first collection of witch ritual that was published by a mainstream publisher. In 1975, she published a book called Witch, which was just her kind of ruminating on witchcraft. And she called the power that unites the world the Force. Before George Lucas's movie came out, I do not want to say that witchcraft directly impacted Star Wars. However, witchcraft directly impacted Star Wars. And it is possible that George Lucas got the idea of the Force by reading Lady Sheba. So there you go. A little tidbit there. Well, now I'm blown away. So let's talk about the original trilogy to start with. And I'm going to steal the microphone for a second because I was 4 years old when Star Wars, A New Hope, as it's titled now, came out, and I saw it in a drive-in theater, and I had never seen anything like that in my entire life and was instantly in love with these movies, as were every kid that I knew up until really we were done with high school. Everybody loved these movies. Nothing had been like this before. Nothing was really like this since until we got to superhero movies, I think, in the 1990s. And it was just such a powerful moment in the zeitgeist. Everybody wanted to be Han Solo. Everybody wanted to be Luke Skywalker. The merchandising, the pajamas, the toys, it was unlike anything anyone else had ever seen before. And one of the things about Star Wars that I think people miss is those movies were originally made for kids. And then we go back now and we want the themes to be more adult. We want things in them to hold up better than they do 35, 45 years later. But then we forget that when you're 4, you're going to love something like that. And it's hard to recapture your elementary school years necessarily.
I just want to jump in. I don't think they were made for kids, and the number of people, the original ones, but the number of people, it wasn't just the kids who loved these movies back then. Do you remember the lines for Return of the Jedi? Do you remember? I mean, they were out the door when that movie came out. Everyone was talking about, is it really his father? Is it, what's going on? So that was insane for a movie back then. So
I mean, my father went with us to all these movies and would argue with us whether or not Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father, and was correct and I was wrong. As people who are younger than Heather and I, Beckie-Ann and Courtney, how do you react to the original trilogy? What are your thoughts on it?
Go ahead, Beckie-Ann.
To me, personally, I remember the first time. So my parents didn't say like, hey, there's this thing. Like, obviously, I feel like there is a change in you when you watch Star Wars for the first time, right? Like, I think everyone knows the first time they watched it. It's like, I hesitate to say, but also E.T. is another movie like that. Even though I'm from a later generation, watching the original Star Wars for the first time still was like, I was sitting at my babysitter's house. I don't remember anything else I watched at that house, but I remember watching them, and they're introducing these fantastical characters and talking robots and friends that are not human. And so it really brought like this perspective of broadening what a friend could look like and what friendship looks like and what you go through. And then my unique experience is that the newer ones started coming out, and I remember it was the countdown to the millennium, and I had the princess shirt and it had a little countdown to the year 2000. So that was something that my brother and I really got into. But I always remember like liking it and saying like, this is a different kind of film. It's not like what I'm used to seeing. And we didn't get stuff like that until much, much later with like Lord of the Rings and stuff, like things that you could get into and there was a story to follow and you get connected and you grow with them. So that watching it for the first time, it was still impactful, but it will never be when it was sweeping the nation impactful. But it still held like some gravity.
For me, same thing as Beckie-Ann. Like, I remember watching it for the first time. I had a really rough childhood, and my dad, one of the only good memories I have with my dad was sharing Star Wars. And he showed it to me, and I loved it, and it was our thing. And so I've been chasing that nostalgic high ever since. And when it came to Nathan being old enough to watch them, like, I was counting down the days until I could show my kid Star Wars and have that moment with him. And lucky for me, he became obsessed, and it became one of his autistic special interests. So our whole life is Star Wars. And I was lucky enough to be able to bring him to see a Star Wars movie. It was the last one that came out on opening night, and I never got to do that. So it was like the magic of that. I don't even think I remembered the movie when I walked out the doors, but he used to always ask me, can I wear my Darth Vader mask? Can I, like, to places, can I wear my Darth Vader mask? And it was never appropriate. But then I said, guess what? We're going to see Star Wars. And he said, can I wear my Darth Vader mask? And I said, of course you can. And the look on his face, he was like, what do you mean? So here's my little nugget all dressed up like Darth Vader with his little Kylo Ren bear that plays the Imperial March, ready to go. We get into the theater, we go up to the concession stand, and I'm like, what do you have that's Star Wars? And they have all kinds of special this. I was like, I'll take one of everything, give me all of it. And we get there and we sit in the seats, and it was like such a communal experience to see that. Like, I talk about this all the time, how much I love going to see a movie in the movie theater. This was on such a different level. I remember like the guy next to us was by himself, and he left his like collector cup for us. And then there was two brothers that were next to us. One was special needs, and the care that went into like the one brother taking care of his other brother and being like hyping him up and getting so excited to see the movie. And then the theater was packed. We got the last two seats. And then all of a sudden, and I'm looking at Nathan and I'm looking at the screen, and then all of a sudden, A Long Time Ago in a Galaxy Far, Far Away comes on the screen, and I lost it. And I was sobbing for like 5 minutes because I couldn't believe that like I got to live this way. Because I've goosebumps talking about it. Because I'd always wanted that. And that's the power that is Star Wars. And then we were lucky enough, not to stray from the movies too much, we were lucky enough that like one of my biggest dreams was that I wanted to take him to Disney, to Galaxy's Edge, before he was too old to not enjoy it. And shame on me for thinking that would ever happen, because at 37, it was magic to me. Like, we went and made our own lightsabers, and that experience, like, again, I was hysterical because I was there. I was immersed. I was a Jedi or a Sith or whatever, and I watched my child get to like live this dream of his. And like at the end of the experience, Yoda's voice comes over the speaker, and he's giving you a pep talk. The lights dim down, and they have all the lightsabers turn on, and they raise their sabers. And it was like life changing. Like Beckie-Ann said, like just that moment to watch my kid get to do that. And then I got to do it after him. And I thought, oh, well, we just did it, so it won't be a big deal. And it was a huge deal. It was like a massive deal, like putting that together and getting that moment myself too. So I think that for me, Star Wars is, it's nostalgia, but not just for movies. It's nostalgia for the magic and the experience and, you know, all the things that came along with it, because it's not something that people just are like, oh, let me put a movie on and watch it by myself. It's always with friends, or it's with family, or there's a memory attached. And I think, you know, witches or no witches, that's the magic that is Star Wars.
When they re-released the original trilogy back in the 90s, before they released The Phantom Menace, I went to opening night for all three of those movies. And I remember sitting at the theater, and I'm in college at this time with a bunch of all my college friends, so we're like young adults and kind of serious. But when Han Solo blows up the TIE fighter so Luke can blow up the Death Star, I was like, woo! And yelled super loud in the theater. And then everybody else started yelling and cheering, and like it like broke the bubble. And then in the other movies, we did that in the second and third movies, like from the very start, you know, and the Death Star blows up and everybody goes crazy. I have a question for Richard-Lael, though. As somebody who doesn't like these movies, are you ever lost like in the cultural zeitgeist? No. Because Star Wars is such a part of the fabric of so many things.
Where I don't, the film does not appeal to me. The series does not appeal to me. I can absolutely understand. I mean, I would have to be living under a rock to actually not know the plot for at least one of them. I've seen Family Guy. I mean, it's everywhere. It is in the zeitgeist. So no, I'm not lost as far as that goes. And I have to say that the things that inspired Star Wars, I thoroughly enjoy. Heather, you mentioned that this was a lot closer to The Ring than Star Trek, and you're right. And it is also inspired by the music of Wagner, Richard Wagner. It is a space opera. I identify with that. In small bits, I can actually love the Ring cycle. I love Metropolis, 1927, who inspired the look of the robot. I don't remember his name. Buck Rogers of the 25th century, Flash Gordon, the original comic book. These are things that I can absolutely understand, and I can get behind the zeitgeist of, and I can see how people would be fascinated by it and enthralled with it. But for me personally, the major reason, there's two things that I fight with myself over. And one of them is that it sort of simplifies magic into all good and all bad. And magic is only used as a weapon. And that's a thing that I struggle with as far as the zeitgeist of the film. And then it also reminds me, I have a really hard time with anything that reminds me of the 1930s and 40s in Germany. And I can't help it. 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 And I know the good guys win. Yay, they blow it up. Great. But I have PTSD from, I don't even know why I have PTSD, but really when I think about that time, it makes me nauseous to the point where I almost can't function, and where I get all of the pretty lights and the stars and the robots and the epic opera of the space, it just overwhelms me, and that's why I don't enjoy it. But I can understand why people who don't have that same emotion that I do, that they're more disconnected. I can understand why it would be a popular thing.
I take back putting my sunglasses on, because that's valid. So
yeah, that is valid.
And that's not just having poor taste like Jason. That's an actual reason. So
yeah.
Holy crap! We haven't even gone that far yet, Courtney.
We haven't even gone there yet.
Wait, I have a question. I have a question for all of us, and I have a question for everyone in the chat. I would like to know whether or not this was a unique experience for me, and I believe that it's not. But how many of us sat in our bedrooms after watching any version of Star Wars and tried to like use the Force to move things around?
That was my whole childhood. I have to jump in here because I had a similar being of similar age to Jason, Star Wars, we were the perfect generation to capture all of these movies in the way that they were designed, because that's what they were designed for. The new ones were designed for those of us who saw them as kids when we were younger, could remember that. But I saw them as a kid, but I was not only watching them, I was raised by a Star Wars fanatic. So my dad is a huge Star Wars fan. He's read all the books and watched the movies. I don't know if he's watched all the recent cartoons and stuff like that, but he also worked for Kenner at the time. So he was working for the toy in advertising, doing commercials for it. So we also had all the toys, and he may still have a lot of them, to my mother's dislike, packed in the closets. So in fact, I have behind me, I'll just show off my AT-AT walker here, because he was in the commercials in the 80s. He is an original, and he was actually in the commercials. If you saw the commercials in 1983 for this AT-AT walker, he was the actual one you're seeing. So he's been with me, and my original Princess Leia. So my dad would buy us all the toys, at the holidays. We'd wind up with toys, and he bought this one for my sons when they got. So I had a similar relationship with Star Wars as Courtney has, because then I had, not only was my dad when my kids were born, showering them with all these toys. This is Black Phillip's best friend. Bought all these toys for my kids too, and I got to introduce my kids, and every time we got to watch a new movie and I got to sit with them, the old ones, the new ones, whatever, as soon as that galaxy far, far away and then it comes on, every time I'm done. I am 5 years old again watching the movies back then, so excited. And we just were reviewing some of the newer ones, and my son sat with me and Ben, and we were just it was screaming like you guys were talking about. So for me, this is more, like you said, Courtney, it's more than just movies. It is as connected to who I am in my life and my history as Disney is, which I often talk about. It's that nostalgia that it's how I grew up. My dad is a massive Star Wars fan. Everything was Star Wars in my house. So it's huge. And the movies, I remember seeing them in the theaters, and I loved every minute of it. And I still to this day love every minute of it, and for so many reasons. And I think, getting back to the witchcraft thing, the magic of Star Wars, magic in Star Wars, if we call it the Force, is on both sides. And the one thing I think maybe Star Wars is a little bit of why I found witchcraft, because the concept of the Force is an animistic concept. And I subscribe to that, in the witching world. So I think, in even watching the new movies, I'm like, yes, that's it. They understand it. So I think there's a little bit of something in Star Wars that maybe set me towards the witchcraft path.
I would love to address the comment that just came on the screen, Jar Jar Binks for president, because I take personal offense to this, because Jar Jar Binks is the worst movie character in the history of all cinema.
Jar Jar Binks is problematic, Courtney.
Here's the thing. So, moving on to the worst 3 movies of the franchise, I went and saw.
Wait a minute. So, which are the worst 3 of the franchise?
Episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
So, Jar Jar Binks started it off.
Okay.
So I was I think in middle school when Phantom Menace came out, and my dad took me to see it. So I did see that, but it was like, it wasn't the same experience, because I was kind of like, what is happening? The only saving grace for that movie for me at the time was that Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi gave me the same feeling that the Witch Boys and the Covenant give me. And so I had a big fat crush, and I had an Obi-Wan lunchbox, and I used to proudly carry it around school. But the more I thought on it, the more I was like, this was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And it felt like it ruined the franchise entirely to me. So I held on to that, and I was one of those people that were like originals or nothing for a long, long time until I showed Nathan the movies, and then he wanted to watch all of them. So Jason, if you hadn't been so impatient, you could have heard the rest of what I was going to say.
The force was not with me.
So after, when I was showing them to Nathan, I was like, prepare yourself, okay? Because the original 3, those were magic. Buckle up. The first 3 might lose you. He was so into Darth Vader and the backstory of Darth Vader that watching him watch episodes 1, 2, and 3, I actually was able to like put my own feelings about it aside and my own memories about it aside and watch it almost through his eyes. And then I was like, okay, I'm into this. So by the time the newer 3, the sequels came out, it was different. It was, you know, this was something that I got to enjoy with him together. And, you know, then I fell in love with those ones. So while they are the worst 3 in the franchise, the first 3, episodes 1, 2, and 3. Yes, Jason. I don't hate them as much as I used to. I'm not part of that camp anymore.
Courtney, I agree with you. The middle section, the middle movies, 99 and 2002 and 2005. So when she's saying the first 3, she means 1, 2, 3. She doesn't mean the oldest movies. She's talking about the 1, 2, 3 in the series are actually, I agree, the worst 3 of the 9.
So I'm confused. Why? Wait, so it starts with 4?
So yeah,
the first movie that came out was 4. A New Hope came out first. Empire Strikes Back, which is I Will Die on This Hill, the best movie of the franchise. Return of the Jedi was 3rd. Then
that would be 4, 5, and 6. Why didn't it start with 1, 2, 3?
Because he told the story flip-flopped.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Because he makes lots of claims that he had the whole story written out. If you actually look at Star Wars A New Hope critically and then compare it to Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, I don't believe that he had the whole story mapped out at all, or he wouldn't have put the incest in it that he did. And then, though, he wanted to tell the story of how Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader, which are what we call the prequels, movies 1, 2, and 3.
On that, though, this is what I know. I haven't watched it. I don't know it. But was anybody else offended that a man of color was not Darth Vader? Because it was James Earl Jones who voiced him. And I have a friend who has his mother is a woman of color. His father is white. And he's autistic. And he loved the whole genre. He loved it. And then when they revealed they take the helmet off and it's not a man of color, it was a little bit, I think that was a little insulting.
I would agree, but also at the very least, the man of color was not a genocidal murderer, which is also speaks well. If we look throughout history, it seems like most genocidal murderers tend to be white guys. So, you know, I'm just going to throw that out there.
I have to agree with that. That's a hot take.
I will say, Courtney, when I saw Phantom Menace, I was very excited. Somebody picked us up midnight tickets because that was like, you know, exactly when it was coming out, and was super excited. Went with a bunch of friends. Ari, my now wife, was with me, and we watched the movie, and we were so excited. And when it was done, my roommate just touched my shoulder and he goes, "Well, Jason, I think we can say that at least it was a Star Wars movie." And with that, we walked out.
Yeah, people didn't like Anakin either, and felt it was a little too silly. I think there were parts of I think they could have done a better job. I think doing that story it was important, but man, it didn't balance it right. They just did not balance it right.
The best thing to come out of that movie was the Weird Al song that I sing daily still.
The what?
The Weird Al song.
Okay.
Little Anakin guy.
Time ago, in a galaxy far away, Naboo was under an attack. I was singing it earlier because I was thinking about it.
I think that in a Phantom Menace, the best lightsaber fight is in a Phantom Menace with Darth Maul. That lightsaber duel is amazing, and then you have the Duel of the Fates song. I mean, we could talk about John Williams' soundtrack for an hour. It is the masterpiece all the way through all of the films.
I have to agree, especially with Darth Maul. Darth Maul was terrifying, and I loved him.
And you know what I know about Darth Maul? This one comes from dealing with the evangelical circles that I deal with, and the fact that now, even still, you can find memes of, and they'll use Darth Maul as the devil.
Well, funny enough, some of those memes are like, I feel like the ghost from the Conjuring movie, who, when that whatever it was appeared, I was like, Darth Maul is in the Conjuring.
Yeah, there were good moments in that. There were really good moments, and what I loved about the first three is that that it set up what Richard-Lael said he can't tolerate. It really hit it home, the 1930s German, the Nazism that Lucas really wanted to pull out of the first three that's there, but he explains it and he shows it. And even the messages in that might be valid for us to be actually watching and paying attention to right now in our current political climate, because he spells out exactly how that republic became the empire, and how those pieces were laid out. And that there's parts of those three that are very good. There's moments, the lightsabers, the colors, the filming, but they were not as impactful as the first three. They didn't hit the chords. They didn't pull you in. They would not have launched the Jedi religion on their own. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Can I just really quick say thank you, Taya? I got that wrong. It wasn't The Conjuring. It was Insidious. And that was right. Yeah. Sorry.
So what does everybody think about Jar Jar Binks? I mean, that's the most polarizing figure in all 9 of the movies, I think.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Richard-Lael.
I was going to say I haven't seen it, but I didn't live under a rock, and I saw all of the advertisements when it was, and I was embarrassed even then. So I'm going to. Jar Jar gets a big thumbs down, because that is some Uncle Tom foolery.
Mm-hmm.
I am infatuated though with the theory that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord, and if you can go onto YouTube and watch these videos, and they'll show Jar Jar like jumping into the water and doing 20 flips before landing into the water, the kind of thing that only a Jedi or a Sith could do. And he does like little mind control magics throughout the movie, and he orchestrates everything when you think about it. And I think, to me, that would be the brilliant retcon, just to go back and admit that Jar Jar is pure evil. And that would redeem everything about the prequels.
Yeah, I don't know about all that.
I think deleting Jar Jar, like if we could get like a new director's cut, like a fan cut, where the whole Jar Jar, everything about him was deleted from the thing, and then they replaced Anakin with someone who wasn't so whiny and ridiculous, then maybe we could talk.
Also, Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie in the entire series. I'm not saying that it is the best movie, because I'm not foolish, but it is my favorite movie. And that last hour when Anakin turns to the dark side is gripping and is powerful. And when he goes into the Jedi Temple and he kills the younglings, that is some dark, dark stuff. That is dark. Some serious stuff. And I love that movie so much. I was watching it before we started the show. I know, Courtney, you hate it. I know.
Well, because it's just another grown adult white man having a temper tantrum. Like, for what? Okay, I've seen it. I've seen it everywhere. I don't need to see any more of it. Like, calm down, get a therapist, and move on.
Yeah.
Does
Beckie-Ann, you've been very quiet.
I didn't want to interrupt, but I will say that those movies, they're not great. Okay, like I understand what she was saying. Like they wouldn't create Jediism from them. It would have been like a little moment, and that's it. There might have been one. It wouldn't have been. We have to keep making more movies. But for us, it was like, this is for us. Like those old ones were for our parents, and these are for us. So as a kid experiencing Anakin, I thought he was cool. I was like, he's cool. Like, I want to be like that. And Jar Jar, like, obviously I didn't want to become evil, but like, I thought he was cool. And I was kind of heartbroken that was where the direction it turned. But Jar Jar, as a kid, and I know my brother, we're not the only kids in the universe, but going to school, like, it was fun to pretend to be him. It wasn't until you became an adult and you're like, oh, like that's not only bad. The fact that we were doing that out of context for people that didn't know what Jar Jar was, they were probably like, "Oh, those racist, problematic kids are running around." But they put them and it was everywhere. It was our Pizza Huts and everything. So that. It's weird to me because there are people who were adults experiencing Jar Jar and they always knew that was not a great take and he shouldn't exist. But as a kid, we have no concept of that. So we were like, oh, he talks like differently and he looks a certain way. So we thought he was fun. And now it's like, I don't mourn him though. I agree with Courtney, like delete it, like pretend that, sorry, we did not mean to do that.
I've always thought it's interesting if you ask some people who are millennials or younger who watch the prequels come out as kids, those are their favorite Star Wars movies. And I have to think about it too sometimes because I'm a Gen Xer and I'm a little biased towards the original ones, but I don't think they're as bad as everybody, like people of my generation say they are. And they really do appeal to a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
As an elder millennial who saw them come out, like it didn't give me, even as it was happening, it didn't give me the same experience. And I think that's why I like, whether or not they're better movies, we could argue about it all day, but that's why I like the sequels better. And again, I think it comes back to what Heather's talking about, the nostalgia. So the feeling that I got watching the originals with my dad did not happen when I went and saw, I went with my dad to see Phantom Menace. It didn't happen when we saw that. But when I took my kid to see whatever the last one was in the movie theater, it happened then. And so I have a love for the new ones in a way that I will never love not the originals. I'll never love the prequels because I don't know what missed, but it missed.
Yeah, I agree. I remember seeing them all in the theater. I brought a C-3PO. I went with fans. We went with friends, and we had a good time. I remember having a good time going because it's Star Wars and because I love Star Wars. And I was able to talk to my dad on the phone about it and my brother, and we laughed and stuff. And again, there were parts like the Darth Maul and Mustafar at the end and all of that darkness at the end of that last one. And there were moments that were really good. Queen Amidala's costumes and and I loved watching. I was blown away by the step by step, like I said, of the presentation of the fall of that republic and how it turned into the empire. That to me, being someone who's interested in studying that history and knowing this kind of socio-political dynamics, I was nerdly fascinated with that aspect of it. So there are parts of it I didn't hate those movies. I just think they were the weakest of the 9 in my mind. And again, I don't believe they wouldn't have alone launched the fandom that we have today, but I think seeing the Darth Vader story, and I can see how people would be drawn into it, seeing how Darth Vader got to be Darth Vader was also a fascinating thing to hold your attention through them. Mm-hmm. And I think this is not the first, but it was one of I think these movies also may have launched the popularity of the backstory of the villain.
Yep. Yes.
Which now in the last 10 years has been very, very common. But I think this was one of the first mega brands, mega franchises to really do that and do it well. The movies might have not been their top movies, but they did the backstory well. And I think this was one of the first.
I will say that George Lucas had a story to tell with the prequels. Mm-hmm. He did not tell it well, but he had a story to tell, which is why I hate the sequels, the later movies, 7, 8, or 9 so much, because there is no coherent story there. There was no master plan. All of those movies were assembled one piece at a time, and they don't really tell a story that connects in any way, shape, or form. Search your feelings, Courtney. You know this. to be true.
I disagree wholeheartedly, actually.
Everything that happens in The Last Jedi is retconned out of the final Skywalker, Rise of Skywalker movie. There is no continuity between those three films.
Wow. Imagine saying something so bold and so wrong.
It's
Just
so
out loud.
correct. And they were so bad that you haven't seen a Star Wars movie in years because they ruined the franchise.
What?
Yes.
He does have a
my.
point. Disney. The funny thing about Disney is that Disney knows money. And yes, they use nostalgia against us. Yes, they do that. Yes. And they have not made a Star Wars film in years, and maybe because the last films did not make the money that they thought they were going to make. Otherwise,
Whoa.
Whoa.
Or it's because people are not going to the movies anymore, so they're capitalizing on series because people are sitting at home and binge watching things, and that's what it is.
It's because the last movie got a thumbs down on Rotten Tomatoes. They all still made a lot of money.
Rotten Tomatoes,
but there was a lot a backlash about the new movies.
So
Wait a
mad.
second.
I'm
Wait a
so
second.
mad. I can't.
Wait a second. Hold on a second.
Huh?
Let's just talk about movies in the theaters for Disney for Star Wars. The first 3 ended in 1983. They didn't make one until 1999. The last one ended in 2019. As far as I know, the math, if they're going to do another series, we got a lot of years before that's going to happen. And Disney has been capitalizing on the franchise like mad. The Mandalorian was fantastic. And
don't get me going. I love it.
2023, Obi-Wan 2022, Andor 2022, Solos 2018.
They
Ahsoka
talked about
2023.
making a lot of movies that have all been canceled. Finally, they're moving forward.
Jason is canceled.
This is a different age.
Canceled.
This is a different age of IP than what George Lucas worked with.
Now
This
Disney.
is a different age.
But here's
Let
the
the
deal:
hate
is that
flow
I
through
think also the Star Wars saga, the original saga is over. There's no more. Now they're doing the side stories. Disney is famous for milking milking a franchise for all it's worth. It's gonna have R2D2 falls in love. Did you guys?
Yes.
Do you remember the Ewok film back in 1985? It was a made-for-TV movie. It was so bad. But but Disney does that, and that's what
they were going to make a X-Wing movie, and then they canceled that. They were going to make more standalone movies in the vein of Han Solo. They canceled those because of the bad reaction. And you, Heather, you remember how divisive The Last Jedi was and the bad reviews for Rise of Skywalker. That is why they paused making the movies until they could figure this out, because they were upsetting every piece of their fan base with some of these.
That is not true.
I think that these last 3, my opinion, in these last 3 were more enjoyable than the ones from the 90s. You can turn that light off, Jason. Go right ahead.
Turn the camera off. Just leave.
And that is because they didn't. I thought they were more interesting and gripping. I thought they were balanced on, if you read my article, they were balanced primarily on that nostalgia. That was their purpose. And so they went through that. That's what they used, and they used it constantly. Disney does that in every single one of its cartoons. And it was, and it's you can roll your eyes at it almost like, okay, there they go again. They're repeating this. The last 3 films are almost a regurgitation of the first 3 in many ways.
Yeah,
but
that's
I think they did it well. No, I don't think so. I think they did it well, and I think they were enjoyable. I was cheering, I was yelling, I was clapping, and I thought it was fun. They were fun.
I was booing the J.J. Abrams mystery box. Courtney, do you have quotes for us?
I don't know if I can talk because I'm so mad at you right now. But yes, I have quotes. I tried to somehow contain myself because I would have had 19,000. Yes, Adam Driver, thank you.
And Rogue One. We didn't even mention Rogue One, which is one of the best Star Wars movies. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely, it is.
No,
absolutely.
And but yeah, whatever. Okay, Jason, don't have any more opinions. I kept mine to A New Hope. My quotes are from A New Hope. So I mean, I feel like everybody already knows these, right? Because everybody should know them. But these aren't the droids you're looking for. I find your lack of faith disturbing. Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid. Look, your worshipfulness, let's get one thing straight. I take orders from just one person, me. That's a wonder you're still alive. Will someone get this big walking carpet out of my way? Let him when they're playing the chess game on the Millennium Falcon, and Chewie's getting mad, and C-3PO says he made a fair move, screaming about it can't help you, and Han says let him have it, it's not wise to upset a Wookiee. And C-3PO says, but sir, nobody worries about upsetting a droid, and Han says that's because droids don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that. Han says, wonderful girl, either I'm gonna kill her or I'm beginning to like her. And then of course the iconic, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? The Force is strong with this one. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. That's no moon. It's a space station. Governor Tarkin, I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. I recognize your foul stench when I was brought on board. Han says, you're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home. And then, again, the iconic, someone has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, flyboy. Han says, not a bad bit of rescuing, huh? You know, sometimes I amaze even myself. And Leia says, that doesn't sound too hard. Han Solo says, where did you dig up that old fossil? And Luke says, Ben is a great man. And Han says, yeah, great at getting us into trouble. And then, of course, hey, we don't serve their kind here. What? You're droids. They have to wait outside. We don't want them here. So it was hard to not write down every Star Wars line ever said out loud because they're all iconic and they are part of my vernacular at all times. But that's what I stuck to so that I didn't take up 40 minutes talking about quotes.
Fair. Yeah, I assumed you would be talking about sand because of the prequels.
I didn't even want to relive those at all for any part of my time because I knew I'd have to deal with you and your choices about them. So at risk of my relationship with Courtney, it is time that's gone
for the Mankey Movie Minute. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. We'll see if I'm kicked off the show by Courtney at the end of this. All right, here we go. The original trilogy, and I couldn't help myself. I had to talk about all of them. The original trilogy, the story of a young man who grew up on a desert planet and fell in love with his sister. Also something dark side, and surprise, surprise, an absentee father. Our story opens with a menacing figure in black and a defiant princess all in white. Star Wars, of course, never did do subtle well. And then there are droids, one of whom only beeps at you, which is charming early and then becomes progressively more irritating. Finally, we meet our hero, Luke Skywalker, whose dad, Anakin Skywalker, but Daddy Anakin could never figure out how to use the internet search engines, so he never looked up his kid, which means no child support payments coming in, or even birthday cards with 5 credits in them. Too bad. From there, we meet a roguish Han Solo and the Wookiee Chewbacca. Bad guy then blows up an entire planet, which is genocide, but the gravity of the situation is simply explained away as disturbance in the Force. And the evil Darth Vader, despite committing genocide, is still allowed on the Muppet Show. Later, weird old guy who looks embarrassed to be in these movies sacrifices himself. Princess is rescued, which is supposed to feel like a triumph. But again, we've already seen some genocide. The Death Star is then blown up. Boy kisses his sister, and an entire subgenre of Pornhub is created. What else happens? Sister begins shunning brother's advances for the guy who probably treats women horribly despite being super cool. Brother learns to lift more things with his mind after meeting a tiny alien with poor manners who probably doesn't bathe and smells like swamp. Cool guys then frozen in carbonite. Bad guys pretty much win the entire second movie. The end of Empire Strikes Back. The third movie opens with the sister character wearing a metal bikini in an attempt to rescue her boyfriend. The metal bikini, though, inspires her brother to finally stop being a whiny brat and do some cool Jedi stuff. Brother then goes to confront Dad over being abandoned as a child and to argue there's still good in you, even after Dad killed billions of people. Galactic Empire is then brought down by a race of furry people with spears only marginally smarter than my cat. Dad attempts to redeem himself and then appears as a Force ghost with a bunch of people who know he killed dozens of children just 20 years prior. Awesome. By the way, the cassette story version of Return of the Jedi owned as a child makes no mention of Han and Leia's love story and subtly implies that Leia and Luke are still likely to shack up. On to the prequels, the second trilogy, which can be summed up as boy falls in love with his babysitter and takes it all way too seriously, living the fantasy that fourth grade me had involving a girl named Julie, who was my babysitter on Wednesday nights.
You knew that was
In the first movie, we made a baby Darth Vader who is a really unlikable little turd. The movie really wants you to think this kid is a plucky little hero, but I can't help but think in 30 years he will commit genocide and kill Jimmy Smits. Also, we find out that Darth Vader built C-3PO, but creator and creation never acknowledged this dynamic in the earlier films. And oh, Jar Jar Binks, low-hanging fruit for someone who wants to tell Star Wars jokes. Let's just say that I think Jar Jar sucks and is probably secretly a Sith Lord. Somehow, this first series of movie hangs on the premise that Anakin Skywalker will bring balance to the Force. But I want you to think about that for a second. When the movie starts, there are at least dozens of light side Force users and 1 or 2 Jedis who play around with the dark side. The only way to balance this out is to kill a whole bunch of good Jedis. Why would anyone be excited about this prophecy or want to fulfill it? Yoda, Mace Windu, anyone else who has a name on the Jedi Council? All stupid. This first film is entirely skippable and is only watchable because Darth Maul is cool looking and we get the best lightsaber battle of the entire series. In the next movie, the babysitter and the babysitted chosen one begin a clandestine love affair that has all the chemistry and passion of washing a pair of socks. Love-struck Anakin also thinks this line will get him some Padme boob and butt. I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here, everything is soft and smooth. George Lucas, master of dialogue. Yoda then has a lightsaber fight with Lord Summer Isle himself, Christopher Lee. This is awesome. In the third movie, we finally get some evil going after a too long first hour, and then the whole trilogy ends with Natalie Portman dying of a broken heart. Hyperdrives and fully functioning robotic arms exist in this universe, but no one can cure a broken heart? What them? And Vader's children are then hidden in the most obvious places. In the royal court at Alderaan, the Emperor's biggest political enemy, and with Vader's uncle and aunt. This is like hiding money in your wallet. No one would ever look there. Also, the last moments of this movie occurred just 17 years before the start of the original Star Wars movie, and during that time, everyone ages at an accelerated rate, with the exception of Jimmy Smits, who is eternal. Obi-Wan Kenobi goes from being a dashing young man to a very old man who then dies at the ripe old age of 38. Great job, George Lucas. And now to the sequel, 7, 8, and 9, and the end of Courtney and I's friendship. Imagine the crappiest piece of poop you've ever encountered, and then imagine adding more crap to that poop to make it even turdier. This is how I describe the sequels. Not sorry, Courtney. At the end of Return of the Jedi, you leave the movie feeling triumphant. The Empire has been defeated. The Emperor is dead. Han and Leia will be in love forever. Luke will help create a whole new group of Jedi who will bring peace to the galaxy. Within 20 minutes of The Force Awakens, you find out that the Empire is doing just fine. Leia and Han are divorced, and Luke has disappeared and didn't leave his ex-girlfriend and sister a forwarding address. Seriously, why did the original trilogy even exist at all if it was all just going to be undone in a generation? Also, all of the things you liked about Star Wars, they just run back. Death Star? How about an extreme Death Star? This one blows up stars. Cool, right? Aren't there new stories to tell? The only saving grace are some interesting new characters they refuse to do interesting things with. There's Finn, an ex-stormtrooper, and Rey, who we think will turn out to be like Han Solo, and then we find out that she's a Jedi, and that's pretty cool. But the movie is lazy and derivative and full of J.J. Abrams mystery box nonsense. Luke left us a map so we can find him. How clever, and not at all how a real human being would act. In the first 2 sets of movies, you have some pretty clear bad guys. Darth Vader, Palpatine, those that work for Palpatine. In the sequels, there's Supreme Leader Snoke, who just dies in the second movie without any real explanation. Emo Vader, who has a helmet but not a disfigured face, so he doesn't wear the helmet much, but it probably sells toys. And then out of nowhere in the third movie, the Emperor has returned, further ruining the ending of Return of the Jedi and making Vader's sacrifice meaningless. In other words, Kylo Ren and Snoke and all the bad guys are, thrown away until suddenly here's the Emperor again. Also, while resting for 30 years, the Emperor has been making dozens of Star Destroyers, each of which is the size of Delaware. A Star Destroyer initiative would cost trillions of dollars and employ thousands of people and droids. No one noticed this activity. And remember that one guy who hasn't been in all the sequels yet? Just so no one throws tomatoes at J.J. Abrams, there's Lando Calrissian. Nostalgia. Works every time. And just like Jedi, we get a giant space battle and a lightsaber duel, and the bad guy of the film then sacrifices himself for the greater good. Been there, done that, rinse and repeat. And we only get there after an hour and a half of mystery box nonsense. I miss movies about brothers and sisters falling in love and a guy trying to shag his babysitter. Say what you want about the prequels, but Lucas had a story to tell. Summing up, the original trilogy, lots of fun with incest vibes. The prequels, mostly forgettable unless you lusted after your babysitter. But Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie in the franchise. And then the sequels, pure awfulness that doesn't tell a coherent story. Rey, Finn, and Rose deserved better. Yes. Yeah, I know. It was fun. All right.
There was a quick second where I was like, you know what? I'll have to apologize because Jason, that was great, and I was laughing and I was enjoying it. And then you were like, you know what, Courtney? I actually hate you, and I never want to talk to you again. So let me just shove your head in the toilet and flush it. So now we're fighting.
The best lightsaber battle yet.
It's a wand battle, I think. All right, it's time for Wands Up, Wands Down, the original trilogy.
This is hard because culturally, okay, the things that is okay, but the film itself is
the prequels.
Up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just it's a little kid thing. It was fun. It was fun to see him racing around. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, don't apologize.
Beckie-Ann, your reasons are valid.
I'm sorry.
Your reasons are valid. Jason just doesn't have taste.
They're hey,
or imagination.
I'm up on the prequels.
3/4 up.
My one's up.
Down. And finally, the sequels.
I'm up on the sequels.
Beckie-Ann, are you an up or are you a down?
I went down. I'm going to be honest. I really think that companies don't take so long because they're thinking about wanting to make something good, but they're thinking, how can we trick them into coming back and spending more money?
No!
Yes. Woo!
There's one company in particular we've mentioned that is very good at that.
Yeah.
Very good.
They're like, put it out. It hasn't put the name on it and people will buy it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Not me.
And that's one of the unfortunate parts of it, of Lucasfilms being sold.
The only way that you can trick me into enjoying a Disney film is if they have bought one of my favorite franchises from before, and then they take it over and then they hide it you behind a paywall. You can't see it anymore, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show. All kinds of other things.
All right, there's our voting. Let's talk about where we'll be in the next couple of weeks and months and where we can be found online. We're going to start with Beckie-Ann.
Oh boy. I am all over the place. I'm going to Baltimore next weekend this weekend because the Salem Witchboard Museum has opened a second location in Baltimore, and I'm super excited. I'm excited for John. And so I will be sharing about that. I'm mostly on TikTok, if it continues to exist, and Instagram as My Bloody Galentine. Then I have a documentary coming out pretty soon. It's tentative when it's going to be released. And also the UK version of basically Good Morning America called This Morning is coming into my house in a few weeks, and I'm freaking out because they want to show all of my haunted and weird things. So I'm pretty nervous and I have to dust.
Cool. Heather.
I am here working with my authors, and then coming up in July, the third week of July, we have Mystic South, just 2 months away, and so we are gearing up and getting ready. I'll be doing 2 workshops, one on haunted dolls and the other one on the meaning of the word witch and what that is exactly. So come and visit me at Mystic South this summer.
Courtney.
That's me. You guys will all be so excited about this. I am going to see Wicked on stage for my very first time. I've never seen it, and I'm going this weekend. But then on Sunday, May 19th, I will be at the Wicked Piss Spring Parafair. So come by and say hi at Hard Stuff Hall, which we did an episode of Scared and Alone at. You can find me online at all of the places at the themes, or watch old episodes of Scared and Alone.
And Richard-Lael.
I am really easy to find. I had to throw that in there. I'm easy to find. I am everywhere. Good Gentlemen Psychics Are Sold. I am here in New Orleans. You can catch me on weekends. I teach at University of Magicus. Also, what movie are we doing next week? Did we discuss that?
Oh gosh. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
I mean, it was just such a big night for Star Wars. I think that was the focus.
Yeah.
I forgot what we're doing next week.
I have it. Star Wars. It is going to be, are you ready, everyone? Coraline.
Oh, yay!
I can neither confirm nor deny that I like that movie, as to not give anything away. As we are over time, there's only one thing left to do on our show tonight as we say goodbye, and that is, of course, cackle. 1, 2, 3. Ah!